He took a photo of the ugly giant woman. Next, the picture revealed her true beauty to the tribe. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's begin with today's story. In the heart of the rugged West, there lived a giant woman known to many as the Ugly Giant. Her name was Nahimana, but to most of the people who saw her, she was simply the huge, ugly woman. With broad shoulders, strong arms, and a towering presence, she was a force to be reckoned with in both appearance and demeanor. Nahimana had grown up in the wild, learning the ways of the land, the importance of strength, and the value of survival. Her tribe, the Apache, respected her for her incredible endurance and power, but the outside world could never see past her imposing frame. They saw only what they wanted to see, someone to avoid, someone unworthy of attention. Her face, rough from years of harsh winds and sun, never quite matched the standards of beauty that society so highly prized. And yet, there was something captivating about her, something that even she couldn't quite place. Then one day, a man came into her life who would change everything. His name was Caleb Thornfield, a photographer passing through the area, looking for something unique to capture for his next exhibition. When he first saw Nahimana from a distance, he was taken aback by her size, by the roughness of her skin, by the way she moved with such grace despite her overwhelming stature. But there was something else, a hidden beauty he couldn't quite explain. He approached her cautiously, with the respect due to any person, no matter their appearance. "Can I take your photo?" he asked, his voice calm yet intrigued. Nahimana, accustomed to rejection or mockery, was surprised. "Why would you want a picture of me?" she asked, her voice rough from years of disuse in a world that ignored her. Caleb smiled, the kind of smile that made her uncomfortable yet curious. "Because I believe there's more to you than what the eye can see," he said. She hesitated, unsure if she should trust him. But something in his eyes told her he wasn't mocking her. He wasn't like the others. "All right," she said simply. "Take your picture." Caleb set up his camera, adjusting the lens, framing the shot. Nahimana stood still, her powerful form outlined against the vast desert backdrop. As the camera clicked, he captured something not just in the image, but in her spirit. She wasn't just a giant. She wasn't just ugly. She was more, much more than anyone had realized. When Caleb developed the picture later that day, he saw something he hadn't expected. The photo didn't just capture her size. It revealed something deeper, something glowing from within. The raw power in her expression, the quiet strength in her eyes. She wasn't ugly. She was breathtaking, in a way no one had ever acknowledged. This image was no longer just a picture of an ugly giant woman. It was a portrait of a woman who was destined for something greater than herself. And soon, her tribe would see it too. Little did Nahimana know, this one moment would change the way her people, and the world, saw her forever. As Caleb stared at the photograph he had just developed, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The image before him was nothing like what he had expected. Nahimana, the woman who had once been labeled the Ugly Giant, now appeared as someone entirely different. The strength and raw beauty of her face radiated from the picture, an undeniable presence captured forever in that single frame. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had uncovered something powerful, not just a woman, but a symbol. He knew this photo wasn't just a picture. It was a story waiting to be told, and it was time for the world to see it. Caleb decided to return to the Apache tribe, the very same tribe that had always looked at Nahimana with judgment and suspicion. He could only imagine the reaction they would have when they saw what he had captured. It wasn't just Nahimana's physical appearance that had changed in the photo, it was the perception of who she was. He mounted his horse and rode toward the camp, the sun beginning to set in the distance, casting long shadows across the desert landscape. The tribe's camp was nestled near a river, where the harshness of the land met the calm of the water. As Caleb approached, he could see the figures of the Apache people gathered around, speaking in low tones, preparing for their evening rituals. When Nahimana noticed Caleb's arrival, she hesitated. It had been some time since they had spoken. She was unsure of what he wanted, but she was willing to listen. Caleb dismounted and walked toward her. He held the photograph carefully in his hands, as if it were something sacred. "I want to show you something," he said softly. Nahimina's eyes narrowed slightly, but she nodded, curious. She had grown used to the way people looked at her, but there was something different in Caleb's gaze. She could feel it, even if she didn't fully understand it. "What's this?" she asked, her voice low, almost hesitant. Caleb handed her the photograph. She looked at it for a long moment, taking in the image. It was the first time she had ever seen herself in a way that wasn't filtered by the judgment of others. She studied her face in the picture, the way the light captured the strength in her eyes, the dignity in the set of her jaw. The woman in the photograph wasn't ugly. She wasn't monstrous. She was magnificent. The truth was clear to Nahimana now, though it had always been there, hidden beneath the layers of judgment from others. The woman in the photo was herself, but it was a version of herself that she had never seen before, a version she had never been allowed to see. "You see it, don't you?" Caleb asked gently. Nahimana didn't answer right away. She was still processing the image, still feeling the stirrings of something deep inside her, something she had buried for so long. It was as if the photograph had unlocked a door in her heart. For the first time, she understood her own worth. "I see it," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "But the tribe, they won't understand." Caleb smiled softly. "They will. It's time they see the truth." Nahimana took a deep breath, holding the photograph close to her chest. She knew Caleb was right. She had spent so many years hiding, behind the walls of her own insecurities. But now, with the truth in her hands, she had to face the tribe. She had to show them the woman she had become. As they walked toward the center of the camp, the firelight flickered in the distance. Nahimana's heart pounded in her chest. She could hear the murmurs of the tribe as they saw her approach. She had always been an outsider among them, someone to be avoided or ridiculed. But this time, it was different. This time, she was walking with the strength of self-acceptance, of someone who knew her value. Caleb stood beside her, his presence a quiet support. The tribe watched as she walked forward, their eyes wide with curiosity, some filled with skepticism, others with admiration. Nahimana held the photograph high, letting the firelight shine on it. "This is me," she said, her voice steady. "This is who I am." The silence that followed was heavy. For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the murmurs began to rise, a ripple of recognition spreading through the crowd. They saw her, not as the ugly giant, but as a woman of strength, power, and undeniable beauty. The transformation had begun. Nahimana had shown them who she truly was, and in that moment, the tribe saw her for the first time as she saw herself. And from that moment forward, everything would change. As Nahimana stood before the tribe, the firelight reflecting off her photo, a sense of uncertainty lingered in the air. The murmurs from the crowd had softened, the initial shock of seeing her like this slowly turning into something else, recognition. Caleb stood by her side, his presence a silent encouragement, a reminder that this moment was hers. She had taken the first step, but the path ahead was uncertain. The tribe had always known her as the strong, imposing figure who could hold her own in battle, but not as someone who could command respect in the way they were now seeing her. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. It was broken by Takakota, the tribe's elder, who stepped forward from the gathered crowd. His eyes, dark and sharp, locked onto Nahimana as he looked at the photograph in her hands. He studied her with the kind of scrutiny that only an elder could carry, as though he was searching for something hidden beneath the surface. For a moment, Nahimana thought he might say something critical, perhaps echo the old judgments of the past. But instead, Takakota simply nodded. "This is the woman we have always known," he said, his voice carrying the weight of years of experience. "Not because of the image the world sees, but because of the strength within. The world may have overlooked you, but we have never truly forgotten your value." His words were simple, but they carried a depth of understanding that made Nahimana's chest tighten with emotion. She had spent so long fighting for recognition, battling not only the world's expectations, but also the limitations she had imposed on herself. To hear this from Takakota, a man who had seen generations pass, was a quiet validation of everything she had felt but never been able to express. As he spoke, the rest of the tribe began to stir. Some of the younger warriors, who had once seen her as nothing more than a powerful ally, began to look at her differently. Their gazes were no longer filled with simple admiration for her strength in battle, but with a growing respect for the person she had become, someone who could lead, someone who could teach, someone who deserved a place among them, not because of her power, but because of her heart. Caleb could see the shift in the crowd as well. He had come to know Nahimana as a woman of immense strength, both in her physical presence and in her character. But to see her in the light of the tribe, standing before them as not just a warrior, but as a symbol of something greater, was truly something remarkable. He had always believed in her, but now the tribe was starting to see it too. The once distant, cold expressions began to soften, and as the fire crackled in the background, it felt as though a new chapter had begun. Nahimana, though still unsure of her place in this moment, felt something stirred deep inside her. It was a sense of belonging, something she had never fully experienced. She had always been an outsider, even in her own tribe, not because they had shunned her, but because she had never fully allowed herself to be seen. Now, with the photograph in her hand and the support of Caleb and Takakota, she realized that the world was starting to recognize her for who she truly was, not the ugly giant, but the woman who had the power to transform the world around her. As Takakota's words echoed in the air, the tribe's respect was palpable. One by one, the members of the tribe began to approach her, not with the awe of a warrior about to strike, but with the respect of those who had finally understood the true nature of her strength. Nahimana's heart swelled with emotion, and for the first time, she didn't feel like she had to prove herself. She was enough. The photograph had revealed not just her image, but the essence of who she was, and in that moment, it felt as though she had finally found her place in the world. The tribe had not only accepted her, they had embraced her, and with Caleb by her side, Nahimana felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. It was a new beginning, not just for her, but for everyone who had ever been judged by the surface of things and not the depth beneath. Caleb smiled as he watched the tribe's transformation. He had always known that Nahimana was something extraordinary, but now the world was beginning to see it too. The woman who had once been cast aside, misunderstood and overlooked, was now the heart of her people, her true beauty recognized not just in her appearance, but in the way she had touched the lives of everyone around her. As the days passed, Nahimana found herself in a place she had never imagined. Her people had accepted her, not for her physical appearance, but for who she was, a woman of strength, wisdom, and resilience. The respect she had earned from the tribe was palpable, and with each passing day, she felt more at peace with herself. But despite the newfound respect, something still lingered in her heart. She had spent her entire life on the outside, never truly feeling like she belonged. Now, with the tribe's acceptance, she was beginning to realize that the hardest battle she had fought was the one against her own doubts. Caleb, too, had watched the transformation with a sense of pride. He had always seen Nahimana for who she truly was, but now the world was starting to catch up. He had known from the moment he met her that she was not just a powerful woman, but someone capable of great things. Yet, there was still one thing that remained unsettled. Caleb had been in the area for months, and though he had grown closer to Nahimana, he still hadn't found the right moment to tell her how he felt. Every time he considered it, doubt crept in. Would she see him as just another outsider? Or could they build something together? As these thoughts ran through his mind, he found himself at the edge of the camp, watching Nahimana from a distance. She was standing near the river, her back to him, staring into the horizon. The light from the setting sun cast a golden glow on her, accentuating the quiet power in her posture. Caleb had never seen anything so beautiful. He approached her slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. "You seem distant," he said softly, his voice breaking the silence. Nahimana turned, a slight smile forming on her lips when she saw him. "I'm just thinking," she said, "about everything that's happened." Caleb nodded, understanding more than she knew. He had watched her struggle, watched her push against the world's expectations, and now, he saw her finally finding peace. But there was something more. There was a depth to Nahimana, a quiet strength that Caleb knew he would never fully understand. "You've come a long way," he said, his voice full of admiration. Nahimana chuckled softly. "I've come further than I ever thought I could," she replied, her voice steady. But sometimes, I still wonder if I truly belong. Caleb's heart ached as he heard the uncertainty in her voice. He had spent enough time with her to know that the battle she faced wasn't just with the world, it was with herself. He stepped closer, standing beside her. "You belong here," he said firmly. "You belong with these people, and you belong with me." The words felt strange as they left his mouth, but as soon as he said them, he realized they were the truth. Nahimana turned to look at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then, slowly, she reached out, her hand brushing his. The simple gesture spoke volumes, more than words could ever express. She didn't need to say anything. In that moment, she understood what he meant. Caleb's heart soared, but he didn't want to rush her. He knew she needed time, just as he did. The journey they had both been on, her journey to self-acceptance and his journey to understand his feelings for her, had only just begun. But there was no need to rush. They would take it one step at a time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Caleb and Nahimana stood side by side, their hands still touching, the quiet hum of the river in the background. It was a peaceful moment, a moment that signified change. Nahimana had found herself, and Caleb had found his place in her world. It was no longer about the photo or the judgments of others. It was about two people who had discovered something real, something that went beyond appearances, beyond expectations. They were finally free to be themselves, to build something together, without fear or doubt. And in that moment, Nahimana realized that she had always belonged, not because the world saw her for what she truly was, but because she saw herself. And with Caleb by her side, she knew she would never feel alone again. As Nahimana and Caleb continued their journey together, their bond only deepened. They spent their days working alongside the tribe, helping with the land, the livestock, and the community's well-being. Nahimana had earned her place as a leader, not because of her size or strength alone, but because of her wisdom and kindness. Caleb, who had once been a stranger to these people, found himself embraced by the tribe, not just as Nahimana's companion, but as someone who had earned their trust. Together, they made a powerful team, one that stood as a symbol of change, of acceptance, and of unity. But as the days passed, Nahimana felt a nagging sense of something missing. While the tribe had accepted her, and Caleb's presence brought her joy, there were still challenges ahead. The world beyond the tribe was a harsh and unforgiving place. Her people, though proud and resilient, were not immune to the pressures of the outside world. Rumors of settlers pushing into their land had reached the tribe, and Nahimana knew it was only a matter of time before the peace they had built would be tested. One evening, as they sat around the campfire, the atmosphere grew tense. Takakota, the tribe's elder, had called a council meeting, and the weight of his words hung heavy in the air. "There are rumors of white men coming this way," he said, his voice deep and steady. "They seek our land, our resources. We must be prepared." Nahimana could feel the tension in the air, and she understood the gravity of the situation. Her people had fought for their land before, but this time, it felt different. The world was changing, and their way of life was being threatened. Caleb, who had been silent up until this point, spoke up. "I can help," he said, his voice calm yet firm. "I've traveled through these lands before. I know the ways of the settlers. We can work together to protect what's ours." Takakota regarded him with a knowing look. "You are not one of us," he said simply, "but you have shown respect for our ways. You have proven yourself." Nahimana, who had been listening carefully, stood and walked to Caleb's side. "He is not one of us by birth, but his heart is with us," she said, her voice unwavering. "We will fight together." Takakota nodded, and the others around the fire murmured in agreement. It was clear that they were ready to stand united. The tribe had always been a family, and now, with Caleb's help, they would face this new challenge as one. The next few weeks were a blur of preparation. Nahimana and Caleb worked tirelessly, training the younger warriors, strategizing with the elders, and gathering supplies. The settlers who had encroached on their land were not far away, and every moment counted. As the sun began to set one evening, Caleb and Nahimana stood together, looking out over the vast landscape that had once seemed so distant, so foreign to her. Now it was home. This was the land that had shaped her, the land that had given her strength, and the land that she would protect with everything she had. "We'll make it through this," Caleb said, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. Nahimana nodded, her heart swelling with a sense of purpose she had never known before. "We will," she said firmly. Together, the days leading up to the confrontation were filled with uncertainty, but Nahimana knew one thing for sure. No matter what happened, she was no longer the woman she had once been. She had found her place among her people, and with Caleb by her side, she was ready to face whatever came their way. As the settlers drew closer, the tribe prepared for the fight ahead. They knew that the stakes were high, but they also knew that they had something the settlers could never take away: their unity, their strength, and their resolve to protect the land they had always called home. The day of the confrontation arrived sooner than anyone had expected. Nahimana stood at the edge of the tribe's camp, her eyes scanning the horizon where the settlers were rumored to be. She felt the weight of her ancestors' spirits watching over her, urging her to stay strong, to protect the land that had always been theirs. Caleb stood beside her, his usual calm demeanor now hardened by the gravity of the situation. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice steady. Nahimana nodded, though her heart was heavy. She had never wanted violence, but she knew that sometimes it was necessary to defend what was rightfully theirs. The tribe had gathered, their warriors standing tall and strong, the older members imparting wisdom and strategy to the younger ones. The air was thick with anticipation. Caleb had been instrumental in helping prepare the tribe, using his knowledge of the settlers and their tactics to give them an edge. He had earned the trust of the warriors, and now, standing shoulder to shoulder with Nahimana, he felt a sense of unity he had never known before. "We fight for the land," Nahimana said, her voice clear and strong. "We fight for our future, and we fight for the honor of our people." The tribe's response was a unified cheer, a cry of strength that echoed across the desert. The settlers were close, and Nahimana could feel the tension in the air as the battle loomed just beyond the horizon. As the first settlers approached, Nahimana could see them, a small group of men on horseback, armed and ready. They were led by a man she had never met before, but his cold, calculating eyes told her everything she needed to know. He was a man who believed he could take whatever he wanted. He had underestimated the power of the tribe. Caleb stepped forward, his rifle in hand. "We don't want violence," he called out, his voice carrying across the open land. "But we will not back down." The leader of the settlers sneered, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "You have no place here," he said. "This land belongs to those who can take it, and we will take it." The words sent a chill down Nahimana's spine, but she stood firm. She had faced much worse in her life, and this was nothing compared to what she had overcome. "This land is ours," she said, her voice carrying authority, "and we will protect it, no matter the cost." The leader's sneer faltered for just a moment, but his confidence quickly returned. "You will regret this," he spat. "We will take what is rightfully ours." The battle began in an instant, the air filled with the sound of horses' hooves pounding the earth, the clash of metal, and the cries of warriors. Nahimana fought with a ferocity that surprised even herself. Her strength was unmatched, her movements swift and precise. She had trained for this moment her entire life, and now it was her time to prove that she was more than just a woman. She was a force of nature. Caleb, too, fought with determination. He was no stranger to battle, having faced danger many times before, but this fight was different. It wasn't just about survival. It was about something greater. It was about protecting the land that had given them life, and the people who had become his family. Together, they fought side by side, the tribe's warriors rallying behind them. The settlers, though numerous, were no match for the unity and strength of the Apache. The tide of the battle shifted quickly, and the settlers began to retreat. The leader, realizing the fight was lost, turned and fled, his men following in his wake. Nahimana stood victorious, her breath heavy but steady. The tribe had won, but the cost of the battle was clear in the faces of the warriors around her. The land had been protected, but the scars of war would remain. Caleb approached Nahimana, his eyes searching hers. "We did it," he said quietly. She nodded, but the weight of the battle still hung heavy on her shoulders. "Yes," she replied, "but the fight is never truly over." The tribe gathered, their warriors standing proud, their faces filled with the knowledge that they had protected their home. The sun was setting, casting a golden light across the land that had been fought for and won. Nahimana knew that this victory was just the beginning. There would always be challenges, always be threats, but as long as they stood together, they would always have the strength to face them. With Caleb by her side, Nahimana finally felt that the future was within reach. Together, they had proven that they were not just survivors. They were fighters, and no one could take away their land, their pride, or their people. In the days that followed the battle, the Apache tribe found themselves in a strange sense of calm, though the aftermath of the fight lingered like the smoke from a long-extinguished fire. Nahimana stood at the edge of their camp, watching the sun set over the land that had almost been taken from them. The victory had been hard-earned, but the cost was clear. The settlers were gone, but there was no denying the changes this battle had brought. Nahimana felt the weight of it all on her shoulders. She had fought for her people, for the land, and now she was faced with the responsibility of ensuring it remained safe. Caleb had stayed by her side through every moment, offering support, but she knew the road ahead would not be easy. As the days passed, Caleb and Nahimana grew closer, their bond solidifying not just through the shared battle, but through their growing connection. Caleb had never been one to speak much of his past, but in quiet moments, Nahimana could feel the echoes of it. He had lived a life on the edge, traveling from town to town, never staying long enough to build any real connections. Yet here, with her, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of belonging. One evening, as they sat together by the fire, Nahimana broke the silence. "You never talk about where you came from," she said softly, her gaze fixed on the flames. Caleb looked at her, his face unreadable for a moment. "There's not much to say," he replied. "I've been on the move for most of my life. Never stayed in one place long enough to call it home." Nahimana nodded, understanding more than he knew. She had spent years feeling like an outsider, even in her own tribe. But with him, something had shifted. "You found something. Here," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I can see it in your eyes. You belong with us, Caleb." Caleb turned to her, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "And you, Nahimana," he said softly. "You're stronger than you realize. You've brought this tribe together. You've made us stronger." Nahimana felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she had to fight alone. Caleb's presence in her life had brought a sense of peace, a reassurance that no matter what came next, they would face it together. But even as she felt this sense of calm, Nahimana knew that the future was never certain. There would always be challenges ahead. As the seasons changed and the weather grew colder, the tribe began to prepare for the harsh winter that would soon arrive. The supply of food and firewood was running low, and Nahimana knew that they would need to work together to make it through. One morning, as the frost clung to the trees and the air grew sharp with the coming cold, Caleb approached Nahimana. "We need to talk," he said, his tone serious. Nahimana looked at him, sensing the urgency in his voice. "What's going on?" she asked. Caleb hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I've been hearing rumors," he said, his voice low. "There are more settlers coming. They're pushing farther into the territory, and I'm afraid they're looking for a fight." Nahimana's heart sank. She had known this day might come, but hearing it out loud made the reality hit harder than she had expected. The settlers weren't done. They would keep coming, testing the tribe's resolve, looking for a reason to take what was theirs. "We need to prepare," Nahimana said, her voice firm with determination. "We've faced them before, and we'll face them again. But this time, we'll be ready." Caleb nodded, his expression serious. "I'll do whatever I can to help," he said. Nahimana smiled, grateful for his unwavering support. "We'll do this together," she said, placing her hand on his. The days that followed were filled with preparations. The warriors trained harder, and the elders offered their wisdom on how best to protect the tribe. Nahimana led with strength and grace, her confidence growing with each passing day. But even as they readied themselves for the challenges ahead, she couldn't help but wonder how long they could hold their ground. The settlers had more numbers, more resources. But Nahimana knew one thing for certain. The tribe's greatest strength was not in their numbers or their weapons, but in their unity. They had proven that before, and they would prove it again. As the cold winds began to blow, the tribe stood strong, ready for whatever the future would bring. And Nahimana, with Caleb by her side, knew that together they could face anything. The days grew colder as the threat of the settlers loomed larger, and Nahimana's tribe continued to prepare for the inevitable clash. Despite the growing tension, Nahimana felt a quiet strength settle within her. She had led her people through hardships before, but this time, with Caleb by her side, there was something different in the air. The unity within the tribe had never been stronger, and they were ready to face whatever was coming. As the days passed, Caleb and Nahimana spent more time together, strategizing and organizing. Caleb, who had come from a world far different from the tribes, had become an invaluable asset. His knowledge of settlers and their tactics had made a significant difference in how they planned their defense. The tribe's warriors, guided by Nahimana's leadership and Caleb's counsel, trained tirelessly, honing their skills and preparing for the worst. Despite the constant preparation, Nahimana couldn't shake the feeling that the settlers were getting closer. The air seemed to thicken with anticipation, and the once peaceful land was now marked by the threat of violence. One evening, as the tribe gathered around the fire, Takakota, the elder, spoke. His voice, though aged, carried the weight of wisdom and experience. "We have fought for this land before, and we will fight for it again," he said. "But we must remember that this battle is not just for survival. It is for our future, for the generations to come." Nahimana listened intently, her gaze steady. She had always known the importance of protecting their way of life, but hearing Takakota's words solidified her resolve. She would not let the tribe fall into the hands of those who sought to take what was theirs. "We will stand together," she said, her voice strong. "We will fight for our people, for our land, and for our future." The tribe's response was unanimous, a chorus of voices filled with pride and determination. The warriors stood tall, their eyes focused on the task ahead. Caleb, standing beside Nahimana, nodded in agreement. He had come to understand the tribe's deep connection to the land, and now, it was his fight too. As the night grew darker, the tension in the camp increased. Nahimana could sense the approaching danger, but she also knew that the tribe's strength lay not only in their weapons, but in their unity and belief in one another. Caleb turned to her, his expression serious. "They're coming," he said quietly. "It's time." Nahimana met his gaze, a fire burning in her eyes. "We are ready," she replied. The sound of approaching horses broke the stillness of the night, growing louder as they neared the camp. Nahimana signaled for the warriors to take their positions, their bodies hidden in the shadows, waiting for the signal to strike. The air was thick with anticipation, and the land beneath them seemed to hold its breath, as if awaiting the inevitable. When the settlers finally appeared, they were just as Caleb had described, armed and ready, their faces filled with determination. The leader of the group, a man with cold, calculating eyes, scanned the camp, unaware of the trap waiting for him. Caleb's voice broke the silence. "You've come for a fight, but we won't give you what you want," he called out, his tone unwavering. The leader of the settlers sneered. "This land is ours now," he spat. "You have no claim to it. Leave now, and we won't take what belongs to us by force." Nahimana stepped forward, her figure illuminated by the moonlight. "This land is ours," she said, her voice steady. "And we will not leave. You'll have to take it from us, and that will not be easy." The settlers hesitated, their confidence faltering as they took in the sight of the determined warriors standing behind Nahimana. The leader glared at her, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "We will take what is ours, one way or another," he growled. "We will see about that," Nahimana replied, her voice low and firm. In an instant, the battle erupted. The sound of clashing metal, the cries of the warriors, and the thundering of hooves filled the air. Nahimana fought with the power of the earth. Beneath her feet, her movements fluid and deadly. She had trained for this moment her entire life, and now, she was unleashing the fury of a woman who had everything to protect. Caleb, fighting alongside her, showed no fear. His movements were precise, a result of his time spent learning the ways of the tribe. The settlers, though well-armed, were no match for the unity and strength of the Apache. The battle raged on, but Nahimana could feel the shift in the air. The settlers were losing ground. With a final, decisive charge, the tribe pushed the settlers back, their leader retreating in defeat. The Apache had won once again, but the cost of the fight was apparent in the weary faces of the warriors and the quiet after the storm. Nahimana stood tall, her heart still racing from the battle. She had fought for her people, and together, they had protected their home. The settlers would think twice before crossing into their land again. As the tribe gathered, their warriors standing proud, Nahimana knew that their fight was not over. There would always be challenges, always be threats, but as long as they stood together, they would remain unbroken. The days after the battle were quiet, the kind of calm that settled over the land when the storm had passed, but the winds of change still whispered. Nahimana and Caleb stood together at the edge of the camp, their eyes scanning the horizon, both filled with a sense of accomplishment and a quiet, unspoken understanding. They had fought for the land, for the tribe, and together they had held their ground. The settlers, their numbers dwindling and their morale broken, would not return. But as Nahimana looked out over the landscape, she knew that the true battle was not one of arms, but of hearts. The tribe had proven its strength, but it was now up to them to build something lasting, something that would ensure their future. The warriors had fought bravely, and the elders had guided them with wisdom, but the true challenge lay in the peace that followed. Caleb, standing beside her, sensed the same weight. His time with the tribe had changed him in ways he had never expected. The nomadic life he had led for so long now seemed distant, almost foreign to him. He had found something here, something that went beyond survival, beyond just fighting. He had found a place where he truly belonged, and in Nahimana, he had found a partner, a woman who had taught him the meaning of strength, not in battle, but in heart. As the sun began to set, casting a soft orange glow over the land, Nahimana turned to Caleb. "We've won," she said, her voice steady, but there was a depth in it, as if she was thinking beyond the battle they had just fought. Caleb nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Yes, we have," he agreed. "But now we must build. We must protect what we have, not just with weapons, but with our hearts." Nahimana smiled, a look of quiet pride in her eyes. "We will," she said simply. Together, the tribe's future lay ahead of them, and though there were still challenges to face, Nahimana knew that they were not just survivors. They were a community, bound together by more than blood and land. They were united by their shared strength, their shared vision for a future where their people could thrive. Caleb, for his part, knew that the life he had built with Nahimana and the tribe was one worth protecting, one worth fighting for. He had found something here, something he had never thought he would find, a purpose. The battle they had fought was just one chapter in their story. There would be more challenges, more struggles ahead. But as they stood together, Nahimana and Caleb knew that as long as they were united, nothing could break them. The land would remain theirs, not because of the fight they had won, but because of the love and respect they had for it, and for each other. As the last of the settlers disappeared into the distance, Nahimana turned back to the tribe. They were ready for the future, whatever it may bring. She had no doubt that they would face it with the same strength and courage they had shown in the face of adversity. And with Caleb by her side, she knew that their journey had only just begun. Together, they would build a future where their people could live in peace, where the land would always be theirs, and where the legacy of their strength would live on for generations to come.